So today we're going to go over HR related items. I want to go over reports that you can run related to employees getting their time card, payroll report, employee pay and supervisor. I'll show you how to access those. We'll go over where to go to create a requisition and to do a hire. I probably won't create a hire just because we only have an hour. But I will show you the QRGs. There's plenty of QRGs out there that show you step by step. So creating it shouldn't be that hard, and I can show you how to start that. And then finally, we'll go over how to manage your workforce and how to navigate an HCM, check their salary, check their start date, how to submit a temporary increase or MCD. And if we have any questions or any requests, we can do that as well. So first, I wanted to go over a new process that has been implemented lately, which is requesting presidential approval form, presidential approval before creating or submitting any hire. So to do that, you would go to the budget office site, and you would, depending on what you're requesting, like if you want to do an audit or modify a position, you would click on this form. But let's say we're doing a non-benefited hire, for like a student, you would need to request presidential approval for that, and this is the form. If you're doing a benefited hire, which usually those should go through me, what I usually do is I request presidential approval with this form. But if it's a non-benefited position for a student, let's say, you would just fill this in with all the questions that it asks. You will need to provide a justification. You will need to provide the expected compensation and then where you're going to pay this from. You will need if it's grant, it usually gets approved, but if it's not, you'll need to provide a really well justification as to why you need to hire this person, just because of all the budget cuts we're doing right now. And usually they've been approved. I haven't had any of them get rejected at all. So if you need to make a student hire, you should be able to do this. But this is a very first step. It's a new step that was implemented this year. Not until you receive approvals when you can create that hire. So that's something I wanted to talk about first, just because it's a new one. I don't know whether it's going to go away, but in the meantime, we do have to do this until we hear otherwise. So the only students or hires that don't require presidential approval are work studies, GAs, and temporary lecturers. So if you know you're having a new GA in the spring, you can start on that requisition now. You don't need presidential approval. Work studies, we have already an umbrella approval just because that's federally funded. Doesn't impact our budget. And temporary lecturers, those we need because those are for teaching purposes. So those don't require presidential approval. Anything else beyond that does, including hourly students. To create a requisition, you would go to My Team, and then you would go to Recruiting. And if you haven't done the training, you do have to do the training to have access to this. So if you haven't done the training, you won't have access to this tile. You do have to do that training, which is in the Employee Learn Center, and I can send that link afterwards. But once you go there, this is the site where you will create a hire and where you will create the requisition. You go to requisitions, and then I have a whole bunch because I'm working on a whole bunch right now. But you would create a requisition, and here it will ask you what template you're going to use. Usually for you guys, you would only do GAs, temporary lectures, and work studies and hourlies. Any benefited, I would just send those to me, and I can work on those. But here are the types, and then you would click on what you needed. If it's a non-benefited student, you would click it appropriately. Click the template, which for in this case would be a student. Oh no, for student. Actually, it's called title is called pooled. These are the templates you can use for hourlies. Variable is anything over $25 an hour. So if you are going to hire somebody at a 26 or above hourly rate, you have to use a variable template. If not, HR will reject that. Anything below that is temporary, the template temporary. The monthly one is for a hire that you want to pay on a monthly basis. The minimum, though, for that is $673 a week, I believe. So a monthly would be at least $2,600. So if you're not going to meet that minimum that's required, I would recommend hire them as an hourly. So you would just fill out the fields. The next field is your department, and then this is how you create a requisition for a hire. And there is QRGs on how to do all these types of hires. So I'm not going to go over how to do one just because I don't think we have enough time. But it's fairly straightforward. Just fill out all those fields. The only thing I would remind you is that whenever you're entering the position number, it's not your org number. HR has a different set of numbers that I had already opened up, but I will open them up here again. But the HR position number when you're creating this is not your org number. It's the department code related to HR. And I have those here. I'm going to pull it up real quick. It's right here. So if for example, I'm hiring somebody in the dean's office, this is the HR code I would use. Somebody in plant, you would use this code 22160. And here it has detailed instructions. If it's a work study, you start with 77. If it isn't, you start with 7. If it's a GA, it will say what code. You start with the 5.
Sophia, where are those codes? Do you have it? Where did you get that? I've never seen it.
This is something that I found in Kat's office, so I scanned it. But I do know there is somewhere you can locate it. I'll send you the link. Tanya did give me that link. It should be in the HR website.
Okay.
But I'll confirm that link because I do know a lot of people are not aware of these and think it's your OR code, but it isn't. It's a different code on the HR side. And I'll write it down to send you the link of where to get those.
Okay. And maybe we can save this in the warehouse or something. So.
Yeah, it's saved in the warehouse and under my folder, but I can save it in a more public folder. The only thing I want to mention when you're filling this out is the recruiter. That is Lindsay Kelly. Lindsay Kelly is a recruiter for our college. So there's 4 recruiters at HR, and each of them have their own designated colleges, and Lindsay Kelly is our recruiter. I think I did send that email to everybody as a reminder, but I can send it again as well. Hiring manager is the supervisor of the position. So if you're hiring a student to work in a faculty's lab, that faculty is the manager. And then you are the assistant, the person who's submitting the rec. The hiring manager is the person who's going to do all the approvals. When you submit the rec, they have to approve. When the offer is created, you have to approve. Or they'll have to approve this. And since you're marked as the assistant, you will also get all the notifications, and you're able to edit this requisition too, in addition to the recruiter. Once you have filled out all these fields, it's pretty straightforward. It's just asking you regular questions regarding the job, the hourly rate, and then you just have to put like a small job purpose and duties here. If it's a student, I'd put assist with research with so-and-so faculty member. Job title, you do have to put a job title. I usually put lab aide or office aide depending on what they will be doing. We can't use titles that exist for benefited people. So if it's not a correct title, HR will just ask you what exactly they'll be doing to find appropriate title. You apply the model, you save it, and once you save it, there's a option to attach file. So that's where we'll attach that presidential approval form. If it's not attached, HR and/or academic affairs will reject it. Um, I'm not going to save this, but I will show you what it looks like because I have a whole bunch already. So I'm hiring a GA in ESM right now. So this is the requisition I filled out for GAs. Michelle Peck is there's one extra field for Michelle. She is the academic affairs contact for all GAs, so she has to approve all of these. For GAs, they must be registered, and if they're not, Michelle Peck will reject it. And here's the place where you can attach. I attached the TNF form, and since this doesn't require presidential approval, I did not attach that. For GAs, you will put in the name of the GA you're hiring. When it's a direct hire, HR will create a link where they will need to apply. There's additional steps that need to be taken. But if you're posting it to the job site, this will get posted to the UW job site, unless it's a direct hire. For example, these two that I created, it's a direct hire for these students for ESM. Once it's approved, Lindsay is going to create that link. I'm going to send it to the student to apply, and then I'll move them forward with that offer. And that will go through approvals as well. And I know I'm going through this pretty fast. But is there any questions so far? I know that's a lot of steps. The QRGs does show each step, but normally this is where you go to do hires. If it's a direct hire, you need a justification for that. There will be a private link where they will need to apply, and that's how you'll get them into the system. If it's a work study position, let's say, that you're wanting to post, that will get posted to the job site portal, and you will gather applicants from there. If it's a benefited hire, send those to me, and I usually handle the benefited just because for records. What else? Am I missing anything? Do you have questions?
Oh, I have a question for you. So when you're filling this out, I noticed that there was like an FTE segment. Do you have to calculate that, or does it automatically populate with that and the number of hours they can work? Or do we have to know how many hours they're going to be working? Or I guess, how would we figure that out if it's not an auto-populated thing?
Yeah. So yeah, typically whenever you are hiring a student, you would gather all the information you need from that faculty member, because you wouldn't know how much you're going to work. And what I usually do is just ask them, what's the hourly rate? What is a small description of their duties? How many hours will they be working a week? Where are you going to pay this from? Give me a small justification. And then whenever they provide that, you can submit the presidential approval form, and that's going to help you create and fill out all these fields. If they say 10 hours a week, you would just divide that by 40, because 40 hours a work week, and then that's what will give you the FTE percentage. Okay. So 40 hours a week is your number. Anything below that, you just need to divide that by 40, and that will give you the FTE percentage. And you can put a target start date in there as well, but that's not their final start date, not until you move them forward. Once they apply, and you go to the next steps. That's a good question. Yeah, it's just fill this out based on the hire you're doing. If it's a student, make sure you're doing it as a student. If it's a person external to the university that's coming into work, like for example, this person I'm hiring, she's not a student, but I put her as a part-time temporary, not a student, just for records. Yeah, usually all this info should be provided by the faculty since they're doing their requisition or wanting you to do the hire. Any other questions so far? Okay. So that's how you will start to create the hire. You need to do presidential approval first. And this is where you will go. The QRGs are linked on in WyoWeb under WyoCloud training materials. And you would go to HCM. And then you would go to recruiting and onboarding. And then here, there's an option for each type of hire that you're doing. So mostly you will take care of GAs, temp lectures, non-benefited, and work study. Any benefited, send those to me, but there's steps on every single one of them and what you do after they apply. Once you do create a hire, the last step that probably isn't included here, but will be in the email from your recruiter, is that you have to send that funding form over to payroll. If they're going to be paid from a grant, you need to fill out that HCM funding form. Because if you don't, it'll default to your unrestricted operating account. So just keep in mind that after you do the hire, you do need to update their funding. Which is a good segue, because now I want to show you all the reports you can run under the table of contents and in the reports and analytics tile. So under tools, under reports and analytics, I have all these saved, but you'll be able to see how to get to these reports. If you don't know or don't remember whether you sent that funding form over, you can check. You can check if their funding is updated.
Sophia,
so
I've asked, Bernie said to attach the HCM funding form to the requisition, and they'll take it from there too, instead of sending duplicates via email. So I guess it's probably just your preference.
I think, yeah, it is preference. I do know some accountants do attach it first thing to the requisition, but last I heard, HR and payroll sometimes don't communicate, and sometimes they don't get it. So for me, I like to send it once it's hired, once the student is hired, just so I'm sure that the person exists in the in the system. But I think they're doing better at communicating with each other. And if they do have a HCM funding form attached, they just send it, because they do ask for the funding. So it makes sense for HR, if they're requesting it in the requisition, it makes sense for them to update payroll and where they're going to be paid from.
Okay.
But yeah, you can attach it. I usually send it again to payroll, but it's up to you to see what works. Some accountants at our last training did ask whether it was required for me to approve, because I do see all these come in. If I don't see it, I'm not going to reject your hire, because I know that you're aware of that step. It's just a preference for each of you of what you prefer. Personally, I don't attach it. I just wait till the student is hired, and then I send it to payroll. So going back to the reports, so the ones I wanted to show you are these ones. So the very first one that I have saved here is active assignments. You can check who is, active in your org, and if they need to get termed, they haven't worked for like 6 months, you'll know that you need to term them. Right now, HR is doing automatic terms if they haven't worked for at least 90 days. But this is a good way just to go in and check, just to get an updated list. Employee pay and supervisor, this is another one that you can check their pay and supervisor for anybody in your org. Even your benefited people will be in here. But if you need to check who the supervisor is or how much they're making, it won't tell you where they're getting paid from, but it'll give you an updated list of who's in your org and how much they make and their supervisor. Another good one is a time card. You can check your current active employees to see whether they're submitted a time card, how many they've submitted, if it's been approved, rejected in draft mode. You can go to this report and run that time card report. Like if you want to submit a term but don't remember when their last timesheet was submitted, you can run this report to make sure you enter the correct date in that term.
Sorry, Sophia.
Yeah.
Are these all reports that we should automatically have? Because I don't remember ever seeing that time card one.
So I have them saved here, and I'll go over each one after we're done. You need to go
Okay.
drill down through each of these folders, and whenever you click that star, it's when it automatically will show up in your options. But you should have them. They're just probably hidden in those folders for you.
Okay, because okay. Yeah, if you'll show us where those are, because I've seen some of these, but there's a couple that I don't recognize.
I know, and I wish they would have them. These ones, they would have them in the table of contents, but these are just some that sometimes I just clicked on them and drilled down through those folders and discovered before they even brought them to our attention. But those are some good reports that are really handy. Another good report is the employee sick and vacation balance. So previously, before HCM was implemented, faculty and everybody had to submit paper timesheets. So we as the accountant, we were able to track that more closely. But now everybody's submitting their time and their time cards on their own. So a good way to check whether an employee has sick or vacation left, or if a faculty asks you, how much do I have sick left, or how much vacation do I have, you can go and run this report. This might be good just to run on a monthly basis, or not a monthly or quarterly basis. And if you see some people haven't been turning in sick time or vacation time, and you know they've been taking it, it might be just a good reminder to the faculty. Make sure to submit your vacation and sick time. What I do as in animal science, I just send a monthly reminder. It's the end of September. Make sure to reconcile your P cards. Send me your reports when they're ready, and don't forget to submit any sick or vacation time. Since they don't have to submit their timesheet anymore, it is all on them. And you don't want to micromanage that. It's really up to the department head. But this is just a good report to know that you can run in case you ever need it, or in case your department head ever asks you about a certain staff or faculty member. The other reports I want to show are in the table of contents, but I can show you how to get to those. For example, this one, it's linked here. You go to your shared folder, custom, human capital management, decentralized HR, and then reports. And I can screenshot these if you'd like afterwards. I already had that form saved, but it looks like my computer didn't save it. But here, if you can see that link, it'll tell you where to drill down to. But yeah, they're hidden in those folders. But I'll screenshot this and send them to you. That way you can drill down to these folders and save them on your own time. Does that sound good, Tanya?
Yeah, that'll be really helpful, Sophia.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes,
Okay.
thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah. And if there may be even more reports in those folders once you're drilling down that I'm not even aware of or don't have saved here, but those were the ones that mostly stood out to me and the ones that you would use more often. So the other one is a table of contents. As everybody knows, that's another one that's hidden in the folders, but I have it saved here. If you don't have the table of contents saved, I do highly recommend it, because it's not only for HR reports, it's for a lot of other reports that are most commonly used here at UW. But the HR reports I want to go over are the payroll expenditures without fringe and the payroll funding salaries and element entries. This payroll funding is a new one that I really appreciate, because like I mentioned before, if you don't remember or need to check the funding for an employee in your area, you can click on this report and type in either their name or your org number, and it'll pull up everybody in your org or that particular employee that you're looking for, their funding. This is really helpful to me, because since I handle so many employees, I can just, and if I'm looking at a specific project or a specific org, like I want to know everybody who's funded on my Smith Lever grant, I'll just type in that Smith Lever number, and it'll tell me everybody who's on that grant and their percentages. It'll also tell you their salary and the proportion salary. I may have an example here that I probably could come up, but it does have the salaries. So Yeah, I can probably pull this up. So this is an example. I pulled up everybody on my Hatch grants, and it tells me the employee name, the department, details on their assignment, their position, when that started, and how much is on that grant. So for this particular person, 60% of his salary is on this grant. So if you ever need to know, like your new hire, if you updated their funding, you can run it. You can run this report, and it's really helpful. And here are the fields that it asks you, and you don't have to fill it out. If you don't, it will bring up everybody though, the UW and the university, so you probably don't want that. I would specify with your code. The other report that I run religiously is the payroll expenditures without fringe. That's what I use to reconcile my salaries. That one is a big report. You do have to filter out what you need. I run it every month, July through the last month. So July through August, July through September, July through October. I run it like that. Once November is done, I'm going to run it July through November, just because that's how I reconcile. And you can specify again your area. What I do is run it for the whole college. And then I filter out, like I don't need hourly, so I filter out all the hourlies. But if you're only reconciling for your org, I would recommend you filtering out, or whenever you're filling out those fields, make sure to filter it with your org. I like to run this, like if I'm reconciling a grant, I like to run this in addition to what the grant shows, just to double check. And sometimes grant salaries aren't posted on as soon as payroll is. So if you run this report, you can like anticipate or encumber those funds and expect those on your grant. The only thing with this report, which I know Oracle is working on, is fringe is not included, which is a shame because fringe is a really big part of payroll and salaries. I know they are working on having it, in this report, but I don't know where they are on that. So this will only display the salary or any type of payroll item. This will also display any awards, comp, honorariums, mobile communication devices, everything related to payroll and that was paid to the employee. Just the fringe isn't going to be displayed. So that is a manual entry that, we have to keep. So whenever you're encumbering your salaries in your shadow, make sure to also encumber your fringe, because even though it's not in this report, it is charging to your accounts. If you don't know the fringe rates, I can send those. There is fringe rates out there for each type of hire and type of funding. If it's on a grant, it's a different fringe rate than if it's on unrestricted operating or foundation funds. So this is the payroll report. So this is the report I would run to reconcile your salaries. If you're reconciling salaries against a grant, I would run this report and either download the report from your grant module, or you can also run your grant reports here in the PPM reports here. There's a whole bunch of grant reports here that you can run.
I run both of those too if you're doing a payroll expenditure correction, so that you can see where the future and then fix the past. Both of those are very helpful by employee. And GAs.
That too. Yeah, GAs. Like right now I'm running this for ESM because now that I'm filling in, I have no idea where they're paid from. So I just go and run this report and it'll tell me, which is really helpful because I don't have time to go through all the shadows and stuff. But I'll just run this report, run it on the employees I need or all of ESM's org, and it'll tell me exactly where they're paid from. Or like Winter mentioned, if you're doing a correction, you do need to put where you're moving it from. So this is a good report to run and get that info as well.
Hey, Sophia, how long, or Winter, how long are those corrections? How long do they normally take? Do you guys know? I put some, you're laughing. I put some corrections in because one of my faculty members paid his summer GA off of his whammy, and because his new grant hadn't been set up, but as soon as his new grant was set up, I moved it. And so he's still wanting to make charges on his whammy, but right now it's overspent because those summer GA salaries haven't come off yet.
Haven't come off. There's no set timeline. What I do know is that Melissa, she's in charge of payroll corrections and payroll, and she can't process corrections whenever the monthly and the hourly payroll is being run. So right now they're running the hourly payroll to get it paid out on Wednesday. So she can't process corrections when those are taking place. So there's a very small window where she can process corrections, because 2 weeks out of the month they're doing biweekly, and then a week out of the month they're doing our monthly payroll. So that only leaves like a week out of the month to do it. So if they don't get done right away or in the next 2 months, I'd say follow up. So I plan for like a month, because if you send, like right now I'm sending a whole bunch, but I know, and I gave Melissa a heads up, but she already told me that biweekly and monthly payroll are getting done, because today's the deadline for monthly. So she's probably not going to get it done till the beginning of December.
Okay, so give it about a month then. Okay.
Yeah, I'd say a plan about a month. There's a really small window for corrections, unfortunately.
And there's really no way to track that, is there? I mean, because these corrections I had to send over to the to Mary to have her approval on them, because there's grant funds involved, and then I assume she sends them to payroll, but I don't have any way to track that, and I guess that kind of drives me nuts.
Mary Runner.
Yeah.
I've requested that Mary copy me when she sends them to payroll. Depending on your OSP coordinator, they may or may not already do that. But I just started requesting Mary to copy me so that I knew where it was in the process. And then I have a list of where it is. So then I at least know, like, it didn't get to payroll till a week after I sent it to Mary. And so then you kind of have that a little more structure to your timeline.
Okay, but you just ask her to do that when you originally send her the request, the correction. Yeah. Okay, all right, I can.
And then Melissa, because I've been waiting for a couple corrections to pass, she mentioned, similar to what Sophia was saying about the timeline, but so if you run these reports, you'll see it in these reports before you see it pass in the PPM report or in the WildCloud, the grants management. You'll see it in these two payroll reports first, just because of the timing of it hitting the general ledger.
Okay. And I just sent them to Mary, the OSP coordinator, on the 3rd of November. I looked this morning, so I guess it hasn't been quite as long as I thought. But.
Yeah, there isn't a way to track it. As Winter mentioned, whenever I send it on to, if OSP needs to sign, I also ask them to confirm whether they received it, and then they do copy me. But my coordinator is Lori, or the animal science coordinator is Lori. So yeah, it just depends on your coordinator. I'm not familiar with Mary, but if you ask her, I'm sure she'll copy you. And then your contact in payroll is Melissa. So Melissa Mason. Yeah. She does all the corrections. So if you ever need to like check in, it's been 2-3 months and you haven't seen it, I would just check in with her and see if she received it, because maybe it got lost. Okay. And if they did process it, there's no way to know whether they processed it or not unless you run this report. That's the only way to track it. Like, for example, here I filtered it by retroactive costing. I can see that everything that I sent already did get already processed by Melissa. And that's what I do like about this report. It'll tell you exactly what it is. So if it's a correction, it'll filter by retroactive costing. And here you can see that they move people off. But yeah, if you just send it a week ago, it probably hasn't been processed, but a month in and you don't see it in this report, I would follow up. But they're doing pretty good at not missing anything since everything is online now. Usually in the past, we would send it via campus mail, which would get lost. But right now, everything is sent via email. So yeah, this is a really good handy report, the payroll expenditures without fringe.
Okay.
Um,
Which I've used. I've
and-
used that one and the other one.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. For that WAMI one, you may need to filter through their org or their project instead of your org. Maybe filtered by their project.
And WAMI's just different because there's like old WAMI accounts and new WAMI accounts. So I have like 4 different WAMI accounts for 2 different faculty because you have to spend out their old money before you can touch their new funds. And there's like the old ones are more of a grant number and their new ones are more of like a account string. I've got it under control, I think, but it is kind of a nightmare for WAMI.
I know, yeah, that WAMI is, yeah, your contact for that with Natalia should work closely with that. But yeah, WAMI is pretty hard to keep track of, or anything outside of your department, honestly. But it's good to know that there's reports you can run, and they're all here. So those are the HR reports. Is there any questions on anything so far, or if anything you've experienced that we want to talk about?
I've got a question for you. Sorry. So say like you have a professor that has a GA and then the professor leaves and we no longer have that faculty member. Do we need to rehire that GA into a different position or will they stay where they're at?
So it just depends on the situation. Sometimes the faculty will take the GA with them. You will need to submit their term. Or if they're staying on and finishing their degree program, you will need to like submit a manager change just because that faculty will no longer be their supervisor in the system. And then it would cause issues with approvals and such. But it's usually unique to that situation. I'm not sure if that faculty is taking their GAs or if it's a joint co-advised GA that may stay with another professor on campus. But for sure, if they're staying, I would change their manager in the system. Their funding, make sure the funding is still available there in case they're taking their grants or they're spending them out beforehand. I know you never know what's going to happen. But just being proactive and getting all the details beforehand will help. Just to make sure what's happening with that GA.
Okay.
Okay, let's see. So those are the reports for HR, and I will also send a link of how to access the table of contents. That way you can save that star, mark it the star. That way you're always can have access to that. Next, I wanted to show you how to submit terms, possibly how to submit any temporary increases or honorariums. So if you are the DHR, you should have access to every employee in your area. So Ali, you should have access to all employees in plant sciences. So you are the DHR for them. You are the decentralized human resource representative. So after you've done your training as a DHR, you should have access to this tile where you can see person management under your workforce. So this is where you will go and you can look up everybody in your area. This is what it will look like, and you just need to type in their name. If they're active as of this day, that's here as of today, it defaults to today, they will show up. If they're not active, they will not show up. But if you change the day to a previous day, like maybe June, they were active back in June, you can look them up. You just need to change the date here. So right now, let's look up, I'm going to look up my student, my hourly student. So it looks like Sarah previously worked for animal science. You can tell because her assignment is inactive, but now she works for me in the dean's office. So her assignment is active. If they have multiple assignments, here's where you will see it. Maybe you have a lot of students. I have another student who works for a lot of departments on campus, and you will see everything they work for. So Ethan, he works for animal science, physics, zoology. He worked for campus at some point. It's really important to, if they don't work for you anymore, you should term their assignment because they can still submit hours if they're active. So if you know they're terming or they're done working, let's say on Friday, make sure to submit that term as soon as they're done.
Hey, Sophia.
Yeah?
It might be worth it for you to go over how to term one of the positions if it's the primary, and how to change it out of primary, because that was something I kind of struggled with.
Yeah. So if you are terming a student that has multiple assignments, or if you're terming the assignment related to your org, and you know they work for other departments, you don't want to term his whole work relationship with university. You just want to term his assignment, make his assignment inactive. But sometimes when they're initially hired, they have to set a primary department where they're housed in, let's say. So here you can see that his primary is not animal science. His primary might be Half Acre, let's say. So if Half Acre is trying to term him or their assignment with Half Acre and it's the primary, they won't be able to do that. They're going to have to contact HR to change that primary to another assignment, because since they have other assignments on campus, you can't term them. Or if that's the only job they have with you and you're trying to term them, you're going to have to term their whole work relationship. But whenever you're looking them up, whenever you search them, you should be able to see everybody they work for. Or maybe they have several assignments in the same org. Like, for example, my son Amy, she has 2 assignments in animal science. They're both active. And if I want to term one of them, I'm just going to make sure that it's not the primary. To do that, you do have to contact HR directly, because that's something we can't change on our end. They do it when they're initially doing those hires. So whenever and I'll go over a term after I show you how to navigate through here. So let's say, Amy, you want to know how much she makes. You would click on her. You can also navigate through this arrow here, this orange arrow here. But you would click on her, you would see when she was hired, her department, her title, whether she's active or not. Here, this is a new feature due to COVID. You can see whether they're remote or not. This is something I highly suggest you update, especially now with this new phase. You can see her manager. Looks like she's working for Dr. Stewart for wool judging. And this is just the overall employment. To see more stuff, you go to this little sandwich area, and where it says change salary, that's where you can see how much their salary details. You don't necessarily, and you can change it too, but you don't have to. I go to here a lot just to see how much they're paid, because when you're filling out that HCM funding form, it is a question on that form that will help HR to verify we're changing the correct person or assignment. So here you can see she makes $10 an hour. She started on the October 29th, and it's ongoing. So she can submit hours. And there's a whole bunch of options here. What I usually, employment is the one where it takes you to the main page. Individual compensation, that's whenever you need to submit an award, but that's mostly for benefited people. which I can show you. But if you did need to submit, let's say she has got an award, you would submit it through here. So let's go to a benefited person. Let's see. So this is Dr. Bishop. You can also go through here through this arrow. I want to submit a compensation for him, or a temporary increase. You would go to compensation and then go to individual compensation, and it'll take you to a different page. And this is where you will submit just anything related to payroll. Right now, he's already receiving a temporary increase. So compensation, this is where you will submit MCDs. So at the beginning of the year, you will submit your MCD here. Summer salary, you will submit it here. You will submit honorariums, any awards, housing allowance. Whenever, usually I take care of the housing allowances, but usually when new faculty members are hired, they are promised housing. Housing allowance for moving expenses. Moving allowance. So I pay them their moving allowance through here. Summer salary through here, honorariums. If it's grant funded, you do put that in addition to that. The most common ones are MCDs, moving allowances, honorariums, awards, and summer salary. And temporary increase sometimes, but usually I do those since they're benefited people. So the thing I do want to point out is this gross up option. If you notice, there's always a gross up option for each one. So gross up means that you want to give them that full award. If you don't put gross up, they'll get that award minus the taxes. But if you want them to receive the full award and not have those taxes take out, or us pay for those taxes, well, not technically us paying for the taxes, but making sure they get the full amount net, you would do gross up. So those awards that you've been seeing that that the College of Ag gives out, so like the staff awards, the faculty awards, I submit those here and I do gross up because I want them to get that full $1,500, not $1,000. If I didn't put gross up, they would get 15 minus all the taxes, so the net would be like about 13, let's say, depending on their tax situation. So that's the main difference between gross up. So I would just be careful to click the correct one, because if you do gross up and it shouldn't be, then the person will end up owing money and you don't want them to write that check. Or if you didn't put gross up and it should be, payroll has no way of knowing. So I would just make sure to double check that and maybe put it in the comments when you're submitting this. Does that kind of make sense? Usually you won't need to submit anything unless I've seen academic affairs sometimes submits awards or honorariums for faculty members helping out with teaching in other departments. So this is where you will submit that. So this is anything related to payroll in addition to their salary. Another thing I wanted to show you is how to submit a term. If it's a benefited term and you know somebody's leaving that's a benefited staff or faculty member, send that person over to me or tell them to communicate with me, because there's additional forms that need to be filled out. If it's an hourly, that's in your ballpark. I don't handle hourlies. If you know that your student's going to be done working, or know of students that need to be termed because they're no longer working, this is where you will do it. So I'm going to show an example. I'm not going to submit it because she still works for me, but Amy, let's say she's done working or was done working last week. You would go to edit and update. This is how you would do any changes, either to submit a term, to change your manager, change their assignment. If you need to update that COVID box, this is where you will go. And I want to mention too that there is QRGs for everything that you need to do. So if you ever don't know what the step is, make sure to visit those QRGs, because the QRGs do show you step by step, including the COVID box. They did have a new QRG come out for that one. So if you want to end assignment, you would go here. But this is a good example because this is the primary one, so it's not going to let me. I'm gonna get that error, see, because this is her primary assignment and I can't. So what I need to do right now is contact HR, have them change the primary to a different assignment, and then I'll be able to submit her or make this assignment inactive. But let me go try another student where I can submit it. For hourlies, make sure to, when you are submitting that term or making their assignment inactive, you do have to be aware of the pay periods. When was the last day they worked? Run that time card report just to make sure they don't have anything pending that needs to be paid. So once that's cleared, then you can submit their term. But for Sarah, this is the only one that's active right now. It is a primary, but since this is the only assignment that she has, it'll ask me that since it is the only assignment, I have to term her whole work relationship. So this is the only difference. If they have multiple assignments, make sure that you're only making that assignment inactive, or if it's the only assignment, just be aware that you are terminating the whole work relationship. So I'm going to put yes. I'm not going to submit though, just because she still works for us. And I might have to do separate examples because this is to terminate the whole work relationship. Last day for hourlies is the last day of that pay period. For example, this last pay period that is due today, the very last day of that pay period was Saturday the 14th. So her last day has to be the last day of that pay period. Let's say she got done working on that 13th or even the 12th, anytime before that, the last day must be that last day of that pay period. It causes issues if it isn't on the HR side. And if it isn't, if you accidentally put in the wrong date, HR will reject it and you'll just have to fix that. And I would just put it on all the, fill out the forms, and this is going to terminate the whole work relationship since this is her only assignment. You would just fill out the fields, recommend for rehire, yes. That's pretty much it for hourlies. You would submit, and it will go through approvals. The first approval is HR, and if something is wrong, they'll reject it. But let me go do another student where I'm only terming their assignment. So I'll do Amy again, but I'll use her other assignment. So Amy has multiple assignments on campus, LREC, animal science, but she's done working in this particular assignment. Oops, this is the primary one. Let me click on another one. Why does it keep? For some reason, they're primary. Let me click on the second option. This one. Yeah, okay. So let's say she's done working for WIT. She's done with wool judging, but she's still going to work for the other department she has. So you would just update end assignment, click OK, and it'll tell you the last day of this assignment is 11/18. It'll become ineffective as of the 19th. Okay, And there's going to be it'll display differently than what we saw before. But the only thing that's changing is now it's going to be inactive. This assignment is going to be inactive. The date doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be the last day of the pay period because you're not terminating their work relationship with UW. And you would just review, put in the comments, done with rule judging or done with her internship, and then you would just continue and it'll be inactive. Once the student is inactive, they can no longer submit hours and you can't reverse this. So if, let's say, WIT wanted to hire her again or wants her to keep submitting hours, I will need to create that hire from scratch all over again. Go through presidential approval, go through the requisition process. So once you're terming somebody or making their assignment inactive, just make sure and double check with that faculty member before, because I've had instances where, the faculty member still wants to keep that student. But if they haven't been submitting a timesheet for 30 days or 90 days, check in. Are they still working for you? Can I term them? But yeah, I'm not going to submit this because she still works for me. Is there any questions? I know that was fast, but that was a whole hour. There is QRGs out there for anything related that you need to do, and I'll send out those follow-up links